I would like to introduce everyone to Cristina Cordova, who earned her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Puerto Rico and Mayagüez, and continued to earn a Master of Fine Arts in Ceramics from the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred. In 2002, she entered a 3-year artist residency program at Penland School of Crafts, where she later served on the Board of Trustees from 2006 to 2010. Her recognitions include a USA Artist Fellowship, an American Craft Council Emerging Artist Grant, a North Carolina Arts Council Fellowship, a Virginia Groot Foundation Recognition Grant, and several International Association of Art Critics Awards. Her work as part of the permanent collections of the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Washington, D.C., the Fuller Craft Museum, the Mint Museum of Craft and Design, the Museum of Contemporary Art of Puerto Rico, the Everson Museum, and the Mobile Museum in Alabama, among others. She currently lives and works at Penland in North Carolina. Cristina, after all of that, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to start by asking you the question that I ask all of my guests, which is, how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Gotcha. So I would say that, it wasn't a clear-cut decision at all. It was a process. And I think I had a period in my life where I was lucky enough to be able to partake in different practices and activities and educational experiences that helped me understand or narrow down this set of activities that lit me up, that made me feel alive, that made me feel connected to my community and to my culture. And with that, I entered university. And so in the first 3 years, I continued to survey different courses after switching from engineering degree to a fine arts degree or bachelor in arts. And then I came across this artist that really changed my life. His name is Jaime Suarez, and he introduced the medium of ceramics. And so once I found that medium, I felt completely impassioned and in love with that material as a voice. Then the act of becoming a full-time artist held on the coattails of that affinity with the material. And so I would say that yeah, it was first finding that material voice, and then with the support of my community at first, because I started practicing in Puerto Rico. I felt that there was a professional outlet for me. I visited different studios and I could see my life echoing some of the practices that were surrounding me. And with that, I jumped in and everything continued.
Thank you. When you say you found the artist who changed your life and you found clay, can you tell us a little bit more? Is that when you started college, or how did that?
Yeah, it was at
discovery?
the end of my undergraduate degree. The artist came as a visiting artist, and he was an architect who had done a minor in ceramics. And when he returned to the island, I would say that he started the contemporary ceramics art movement, or jump-started it in the island when he established a studio. I think this was probably in the late 70s or maybe early 80s. His use of ceramics was very bold. The use, the quality of scale. I think because he was an architect, he applied it in the context of buildings, and also there was like an aggressiveness to the surface, like a vitality that I really appealed to me. And so I feel that his approach and the material in itself gave me like connected with parts of myself that I had not been able to codify outside of my realm. And so it really was it was very explosive and wonderful.
That's so exciting. I often hear people talking about the first time they touched clay, or how clay really brings something special out, and then it really allows that very special type of expression. So it sounds like that was the same for you, that other media didn't spark the same feeling that clay did.
Right. It's like finding a language that echoes something that otherwise had not been able to manifest, and clay did that for me.
Do you feel like you talked about aggressiveness? So I was watching some other previous interviews the other day, and there was one that had your teacher, and you were talking together about surface texture and things like that, which is not really, I mean, you certainly use texture in different ways, not in the same way that he does. I love that you use the word aggressiveness. Do you feel like that is a characteristic that you have made into your own form of aggressiveness? Is that something that you
Yes,
echo?
I like that. I like to hear you say that, because it's a word that we shy away from. And I grew up in a culture where it's quite traditional, and there was kind of like a distinct profile that I was expected to fit into as a female. And so aggressiveness was always something that I had to navigate, because I did feel a lot of aggression, a lot of like strong emotional surges. And by the same token, there was like a big demand on perfection, of accomplishment, at least in the context of my household.
Mhm.
And so when I started to see clay and started to understand its validity as this as something that hold on a second. As something that could exist outside of that realm of perfection, like more in the akin to wabi-sabi, right, in the Japanese culture, finding power and resonance in the imperfect, and almost using that as a portal to enter into this other space of appreciating beauty. And that was very liberating to me, because I felt that a lot of those parts of myself that I couldn't claim were not beautiful, and were just like I wanted to excise them. And all of a sudden, this material and this practice allowed me to include them and maybe recontextualize them.
Whoops. That's really interesting to hear too, about when you reference your traditional upbringing, and something else that I learned from these interviews that I was watching. And there was a wonderful section with your mother as well, and talking about going to church and having those images as part of kind of your visual vocabulary as you were growing up. And I think she had a table full of saint figures that you were looking at together. And to me, there's, maybe some, also having grown up Catholic, to me, saints are very bold and aggressive, and they're often sort of in violent situations and showing very strong emotion. So I wonder if that's, it was a traditional upbringing perhaps, but like had those moments of visualizing strong emotion, I guess, maybe, which is something I see in your work now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the pathos in the context of Catholic depictions, or Christian depictions, is so strong, and it's such a I think it's a contrived, and it's like orchestrated to elicit like a very specific emotional state. But even within that range, anger, there's very little space for anger. Usually if there's an embodiment of anger or frustration or aggressiveness, it's very villainized. It's like the army that was or the Romans that were abusing the Christ figure, or things like that. But yeah, the other side of that, or in the continuum of that emotional spectrum, you are surrounded with these like really impassioned faces that are evoking sorrow or ecstasy, or some sort of transcendental state.
Yeah. Well, I think that on that note, I would love to open an image so that we can see the piece that's in the gallery, because it plays right into this idea of, you know, a strong state of emotion, or, you know, presentation of a strong personality for sure. Let me just open it since I switched computers. Can somebody turn the light on? I feel like Cristina can't, I'm like a dark square. Like, okay, thank you. Everything's taking longer because we had to switch. Hold on. I can do this. Okay, save it. Okay, yes, thank you. Let's go here. All right. I am going to open it on the other computer because I can't do this. You guys are being so patient. I am very lucky to have such nice people to work with. Here we go. I'm sharing this and we're gonna go there. Yay. Aha. Okay. So here's a picture of the whole gallery, which I think most people have probably seen, but if not, those of you in the room can go see it afterwards. But this is the picture where you can really see Christina's sculpture Eva 15, as she is really ruling over the whole gallery, and showing us her. I don't want to say aggressive, because as you said, Cristina, like we think of that as a negative word, but we can also own that there is like a very strong self-assuredness going on in this image. Assertive, thank you, that might be a better word. So is that something that you've thought about when you were working with your daughter to create this image?
So the way I work with Eva, and we've been doing this since she was tiny, as you'll see there, as you can see there, is she comes into the studio and she gets on a platform and we start playing around with different positions, and it becomes like a little bit of a cute dialogue where I say, Eva, this, and I'll just throw an emotion or, you know, some sort of trigger phrase. And so she'll assume the position and we take a couple of breaths and look at it. And then when we find something that sparks, I say, hold it. She'll take a deep breath and she holds it as I photograph it in the round. And, you know, it's a process, like it requires her to shed a lot of her day and just really find almost like an alternate way of relating to what I'm telling her. And this one, you know, we found this post through that process. And after I take a number of these, we sometimes end up with, I don't know, 5 out of many different attempts. I show them to her and I say, okay, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm gonna do. Are you okay with that? And you know, she has never vetoed anything, but she tends to have, you know, more or less gravity towards some poses. And so she's like, yeah, let's go. And so this one, so that's what brought us to this post. And for me, it did speak about empowerment. I have been witness, you know, to Eva finding herself time and time again in a pretty insane growth curve, as it happens with many teenagers. But for some reason, Eva's in the past couple of years, because of many different circumstances, has been really intense to the point where she was getting growing pains. And, you know, to find yourself in a different body almost every couple of months. I started to think a lot about that and how brave she's had to be and resilient, because she's been uncomfortable many times. And so I wanted an embodiment of a posture that kind of spoke to that, but as aside from that, it just made sense for me, like the dynamics of the contrapposto and yeah, aside from whatever I extracted from my connection with her and her history, I wanted it to be able to perform beyond that and speak to other things that require that empowerment.
Wow, I'm just writing things down because with my own 12-year-old, I'm like, oh yes, you're in a different body every few months. What a good way to say that. It's so true. And it's traumatic. We forget when we get older how traumatic that is. So you said the word contrapposto. Did I catch the word? And I'm gonna just sort of switch around to a few different ideas that I've been having. I've given, I am honored to have given about 100 tours of the show so far, which I just love. I get to walk around and people stay with me. I talk for 35 minutes about every single thing in the show, and they're right there with me. And I often talk about this triad of classical sculptures, which is, I think Eva is right there with these other two. They are both based on actual, sculptures from ancient Greece. But to me, the sculpture of Eva is equally reminiscent of that incredibly important period in the history of art. As an art historian, I certainly am. I kind of had a moment of gleefully making a slide this morning. It's like, ooh, I'm having so much fun right now. So, I think a lot about the importance of contrapposto and how it transformed the way people can represent the human body. And we think about the period before that was really figured out. So these three ancient Greek sculptures represent the three periods of what we call ancient Greek art, the archaic period, which they kind of had figured out how to make the body look like a body, but it was not very lifelike. There's no shifting of weight. There's not terribly correct proportions. And then the Critios boy is often looked at as kind of the earliest where you can start to see contrapposto happening in the early classical period. Critios boy, because Critios was the artist. And then the Hellenistic period is the last period where they were really leaning into that contrapposto, man. Everybody's leaning one way or the other and carrying things. So here's Hermes and the infant Dionysus. And you'll excuse me for putting you there, but I feel that Eva really deserves to be right there in the same slide, because it's all about that attitude and the way she's standing, which gives us a sense of her being, a real person and really having that sense of wonderful queenliness in the gallery as she's standing there. So yeah, that's true. It is this. I could have put that slide up there too. Raymond just said it's the pose of the David. Did you think about that at all when you were doing it?
No,
One,
not at all.
first question.
I think that the Renaissance compounded, the sculptural attempts with this insight into the mechanics of the body that opened up, so many other possibilities for gesture. And I think once they realized how much more dynamic the compositions would become when you started to offset the symmetry in the body, then that just, everybody ran with that. And yeah, of course, that for me is something from an aesthetic level that I'm looking for, as a sculptor, it's just to really propel the eye in a way that seems interesting and that kind of activates your sense of how you're perceiving your body and how you would hold that weight and that positioning. But unlike the Renaissance, I'm not that interested in stylizing or how do you say
Idealizing,
right?
Yeah.
So I want to, there's always some measure of that happens. because, you know, I do have my hand and my eye and limits and the dispositions that that brings to the making process. But overall, I'm really, at least in this piece, or maybe in this piece in particular, I was really wanting to capture, you know, the reality of a 15-year-old body. Yeah.
Yeah. That actually brings me to maybe a more basic question, which is when you found clay and you were in this early stages of your career, you focused on the figure. So as much as you found your voice when you touched clay and you're figuring out what you want to represent, your teacher, who you know doesn't make figural work. So can you talk a little bit about what I see maybe as your dedication to the figure, as just alongside clay as the way you want to express yourself?
Yeah. So, you know, thinking back, I've interpreted that as being the result of two things. That I think the first one, I grew up Catholic, and my mother's family had this very unique way. I mean, it's not unique to the island, but, you know, it's not the only way that veneration is expressed. But I think it's something they brought, you know, from their small town in Villalba. And they would use saints and figurative religious renderings as connections that were like essential in their devotional practice. So they would, you know, they had these small altars at home, and they would write petitions and stick them on the skirts of these saints. And they had different saints, and they normally, each person was devout to only one. And so my grandfather, for example, was a devout of St. Jude, and my grandmother, the Virgin. My mother, there's a saint called, or a beato, I think maybe he's pre-saint, he's called Saint Johnny. And so this idea of, you know, using a figurative vessel to receive, you know, this devotional energy and this and elicit the spiritual mediation, or, you know, spark the imagination to be able to fall into that sacred space, was really built into me. And so I think that definitely carried into how I make these things. I'm always looking for a sense of presence in these objects, or a space, a material space onto which I can empty myself. And then the other side of that is that I grew up as a classical dancer, and I think the language of the gesture felt very comfortable to me. It felt like a way of expressing certain energies that I had already coined, and that I could continue to expand in the context of sculpture. And so I think those two things together made me, like, kept calling me into the figure, even though when I started, I was making mostly vessels. Like by my third year, I was making anthropomorphic vessels, and then little by little, everything became the figure.
That's lovely. And the vessel is a metaphor for the figure in a lot of ways. So that's wonderful, that transition. I loved hearing that you were a dancer. I mean, that makes so much sense, especially because dancers have such an innate understanding of the body that not everybody else can really appreciate, because you have control over your body in a different way. So do you think you have a special skill or a special knowledge that helps you create the forms so realistically?
Maybe not the realistic part, but the gestural, you know, the dialogue through gesture, I think, is something that came from dance. Also, my relationship with narrative, like classical ballets, the narrative is very poetic, and it's very open. Like, you know, when you think about Swan Lake and you think about how that's coded as a story through choreography, it's just it's like a different way of telling a story, and I relate to that, as opposed to, you know, other more grounded, you know,
Abstract.
over the head, you know, ways of expressing sentiments or ideas.
Yeah, that nonverbal storytelling is definitely present in both ballet and in the way, especially the way you address the sculptural practice. Well, I'd love to ask you to talk a little bit about some of the images. I was just scrolling through some of them, but
so these I think are the old images.
and then you gave me some new ones. So we can go to those.
So these are all, I've been sculpting Eva for a while, so these are all different different versions of Eva that are continuing to stack. Actually, girls, I've been making about one a year. I think there's a year there that I skipped, but then I made two. So this next one is the last one that I did with the plantain. And
this is the one before the current one.
Right, before the current one, exactly. So this
And
is
what a difference. You know, she looks like a child.
yes. And then Eva 15. So yeah, I need to take my time and put them all together so I can keep track of them, because I made them and I'm so present when they're in my studio and then they go, and I haven't been. Yeah, I look forward to kind of threading an awareness through all of them. But yeah, these are just examples of my work through the years. They're definitely out of order, but I think a lot of the themes are themes that still feed my practice. And
yeah, that one's definitely out of order. Oops. Yeah. Let's just put that one back up here. These with the structures that are attaching them to the walls, I also was seeing that as something that, you know, the Eva figures are in the round, but I love the way the connection to, it's not architecture, it's really landscape that you're mixing in to these. And I saw one of the projects that you did, I think it's for the Mint Museum. I'm not sure if this one's part of that or.
yeah, that one preceded that, but the Mint one was, it might be down there too. I don't know if I give you a slide for that one.
Oops, no.
But it was definitely of the same series as that figure.
Can you talk a little bit about what it means to connect the figure to the earth in that way as part of the installation?
So, you know, I was thinking a lot, loosely thinking about the idea of an island, you know, an island, a territory. I had looked at some Jungian, the narratives around the symbol of the island in the context of Jung, and it was just accumulating all of that. I had also, I've always loved The Little Prince, and you know, his tiny microcosm, and so this holding all that present, this series started to come out, and it's been built to go on the wall at a modest scale like this one, where the figure I think is maybe 25 inches, all the way to the other figure, like that one, which is on the stones, is probably like, I don't know, 8 feet tall. And so yeah, this idea of this microcosm / island keeps coming up for me. And the figure, the black figure, is called Colonia. So I was creating just a set of symbolic decisions that spoke about this reality of being a new colony. So, you know, this idea of an imaginary boundary that somehow encapsulated these structures, and then the figure standing on gold, and then the figure being, you know, nude. So yeah, again, using it maybe more of a poetic entry point to speak about things that are very much real and and in a way political for me.
I was going to ask that about whether, the conception behind having some of them be nude and some are clothed, and this one is clothed but in a way, I don't know, at the same time that I'm seeing the shape of almost, go back to the Renaissance, like a Renaissance man's clothing, but then you look closely and they seem to be bandages. I was curious about the,
Yeah, I think ambiguity and also capitalizing on what the material can bring in terms of content. And, clay just exalts in being in describing textures that could be ambiguous, but can still be very rich. And they could be wound-like, or they could be, bandage-like. And so I like to find those edges where, is it male? Is it female? Is it beautiful? Is it repulsive? Is it this? Is it that? And see how I can like balance that edge without necessarily tipping to one side or the other. And this, I think, is an example of that. During this period too, I was looking a lot at Buto dance, which to me is just such a brilliant theatrical expression where, again, you're embodying a movement that is not coded. And so it takes you into all these spaces of the feral or the animal-like or a baby's body before it's understood, how to really control, its limbs. And so I was playing again with all those ideas as I was building these things.
Wonderful. I think we have I think the last time we talked, you said that these are the newer, or that you're thinking about these, but I could be remembering wrong, that the idea of the pieces that have these fences or screens in front of them is something you've been working on. Is that right? This is sort of the...
Yeah, I've been enjoying these. I'm working on one right now. And yeah, again, it's kind of like another opening a window where I can kind of pivot and still in the context of the figure, connect with another layer of information that makes me spark. And this idea of the fences, they're ubiquitous in Caribbean architecture. And they speak about embellishment and protection and entrapment. And I grew up with very state conscious, almost hyper conscious women in my life. And so there was a lot of communicating through gates or gates being closed, or you not being allowed to move outside of a space because you had no access to the key to that gate. And so, just holding those ideas and then harvesting these patterns from real gates in the island, and with the club, with the support of a metal smith, fabricating these and then combining them with figures.
It also is reminiscent of, or evocative of, a mashrabiyah, which it's on our mind here in Philadelphia because our colleague institution, the Museum for Art and Wood, just put up a show about mashrabiyah. So it's this interesting, mostly examples of wooden screens that are very decorative, and how they're separating often a figure of a woman behind the screen, and what that means. So I know you have a couple of more slides here, but I also want to make sure I have enough time to ask you one question that I always get when I'm on the tours, and then I bet other people will probably have technical questions, and maybe you'll even show us what's under that plastic next to you. Maybe not, but we'll just see. Someone in the chat asked about what it says on the back of Eva's shirt, and then so I'll let you answer that, and then I have another question related.
It says de Monte y Mar, which is a phrase from a song called Verde Luz, that by El Topo, it became kind of like a unofficial anthem of liberation for the island. And it's a song I hold very dear. Even as a child, it oftentimes made me cry because it was just so lovely. And then after I moved away from home, even more so, because it just connects me to that version of myself that was just so grounded in my, my community, in my culture, in the tropics, in the tropical, landscape. And so, the piece is pigmented with processed earth from two parts of the island, from the mountains, and then from the coastal area. And these pigments were, cleaned and then combined with the binder and milk paint, which is casein and lime paint. And so there was something about covering her with, this pigment that was sourced in this island, and then putting this on her back, and then just building up this momentum around the power of it becomes like a relic in a way. There's like a real component about it, and then there's like an imaginary curated component about it. And yeah, I was just really interested in juxtaposing all those. She's my daughter, and she's very much she identifies very much as a Latina, but in a way it's like a secondhand culture that she's embodied, or she's absorbed through me and through other Latin voices in our area. And this is fresh. And I did write a little bit of in the paragraph that's in the pamphlet, so I feel that has like all these ideas a little bit more structured, so we can maybe point folks to that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you said that in English it means of the mountains and the sea, which is the de Monte Amar. So when I'm on these tours and I'm telling people that you've literally infused your daughter with part of your homeland, you're covering her with your culture, with where you are from. I mean, I've had people almost start crying in the gallery, I have to say. And it's so powerful that, like you said, it's almost a relic. It's like an icon of her being of that place, that because of you, through you, she is also from there. And that it's perhaps being the daughter of someone. Also, my mom came from Italy, and it's that same idea that you're responsible for like carrying on the culture that your mother is trying to infuse in you. It's really wonderful for the parent and for the child to have that bond of responsibility. So I don't know, it means a lot to me. So thank you.
And it's complicated because you can also say that I'm painting her with this, like maybe I'm forcing this, or maybe I'm sublimating this deep longing into this new reality that has to do with infusing into her these, things that are part of my identity. So, I take it all. I'm not really biased in thinking, okay, this is all benign and poetic and beautiful. I know that there's a lot of shadow issues being negotiated there too. So bring it.
Yeah, well, that's why, I use the word responsibility, because it sometimes can feel like a burden, but in another way is a beautiful gift. So everything in life is both good and bad. Does anyone else have questions? Anyone on, oh, there's another question in the chat. Nope, no, not a question, just a heart. Raymond has a question.
Didn't Cristina use clay from the island to finish?
Well, so that's what she was saying. So can you go over the technical aspect of, it wasn't clay from Puerto Rico, it was a pigment, and you put it into milk paint? Is that what you were saying?
So it was clay
Oh,
that
it
was
is.
to take some of the organic material out and just kind of clean it up a little bit. And, you know, it had a very distinct color that when you fire it would have changed, but this one stayed. It was kind of like a, well, actually one was very orangey, the other one was like a purple brown.
Mm.
So combined, they're kind of multi-tonal. And so, yeah, so I took this and I liquefied it in a blender and then added to that lime and casein. And then there's a product called Extra Bond that I also add to the first layer.
Mm.
Actually, I added it to all the layers because I didn't know. I just wanted to make sure that this was really stuck there. And then I did some tests and it seemed stable. It seemed very much like milk paint, which is incredibly durable. And so I covered her in layers and then I sanded back with steel wool.
Mm.
And then she was waxed.
Oh, and yeah. I usually just say burnished because it seems simpler to explain. But it's good to know the real thing.
Yeah, it's actually like a burnishing because yeah, it just compresses those particles and gives her a sheen. And then the writing in the back is just gold leaf that I painted.
It's a little, is it a little bit like terracage? In that you're sort of burnishing and after it's a totally different thing. I shouldn't ask technical questions.
No, it is like it's a completely different process to get to a surface effect that's comparable.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it fired?
Is it fired on or no? This is after the firing process.
Yeah, it's all cold.
Cold. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for explaining that. Other questions?
I was wondering how you had secured the figure to the base, so that it could stand on 2 feet.
Can you hear the question, Christina?
Yes, so there's a rod that's running through the straight leg that goes all the way to her hip. And that's how she's secured.
I have to just say though that honestly, it doesn't even need the rod. It's so well made and well balanced. And it's really the engineering of the body that Cristina does so skillfully that I believe it would be fine. I mean, I'm glad it has the rod, don't get me wrong. But another thing I often talk about in tours, it's just the engineering aspect of this. The whole show is really amazing that the artists are not just having an idea and having a skill and making a sculpture, but you also have to be an engineer because you have to see where the center of gravity is. And it's 2 parts. So although the top is secured just slightly with that rod that comes up a little bit, it's honestly, it's really just sitting there. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
I was scared at first, but now I just walk around the gallery and I know nothing's gonna fall, so it's fine. Other questions? Anybody online or in person? Do we have another? Let's see. No. No?
I'm actually a bit curious. Hola, Cristina. I'm Amara. I'm actually a bit curious to know if, like, I almost am nearly sure that I can identify that purple clay. And I wanted to know if you had a pin or if you did have the soil series or no.
Wait, what was the question? If I had there?
That so it's very curious. I mean, for those that don't, I mean, I know you know a bit of my work, but the rest probably don't. I work with local clays and I study them here in Boriquen. And it was really interesting because I like when I first saw this image, I was like, wow, this looks like Serie Morado. And then it kind of was like when you said it's like this purplish brown, and I was like, okay, this has to be Morado. And I kind of wanted to get a bit deeper into that. And in the studies that I'm doing, I like to gather a pin and then I cross-reference this pin with the soil survey. And then that's how I'm trying to catalog the studies so that, for example, in the future, if one day there's a book that's being published and there's like how to use local clays here, there's like examples of works like, did you consider grabbing a pin of where you harvest your clay, or would you be able to identify that place? Or
I wouldn't, but I remember, so for me, my interest or what activates me in terms of the color is trying to imagine like the offsides, you know, because I'm not firing this and I haven't done it before. I'd love to do it more. And I do have a lot of clay drawings that I have done. So the functionality of the clay in terms of its plasticity or, you know, any other qualities that have to do with structure are not important. So I'm mostly thinking about color, and to me, color at a soil level has to do with offsides. And so I'm thinking about, you know, if I could find a way to break that down. Clearly that this clay was so purple that I knew it must have had perhaps some manganese or some specifically oxidized iron like Crocus martis, or something that was just pushing it in that like pink purple direction. And then the other one, of course, was just so red that, you know, there was so much iron. And so I started to think, okay, so where are these mineral deposits coming, and why, you know, why so much of this one here and there? But from a very cursory standpoint, like I haven't gone deeper. And so I'm really excited to maybe continue this conversation with you, because you could probably build so much more depth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would just, I mean, even for, although like we're studying different things and you're looking for that color, I think that for me, it's when I like to study the clay, it's like not limited to the clay body itself, but also its different forms of application. So that's why I was kind of trying to see, well, maybe I can string some of these together. And it got me really excited to see this piece. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I can't hear you then.
Oh, there we go.
Look at that.
I was just saying that we were talking about how
Amazing.
your the idea of clay body. I mean, it's funny that the word Raymond, I think, brought this up at some point, you know, that you are using different clays from different areas, and that it's here we are looking at figures and talking about clay bodies. So anyway, feel free to use that as a title of the next exhibition. Somebody else wants to do. Great. Anyone else have questions? Any? No? Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to apologize again for technical difficulties in the beginning, and thank you for your graciousness. And we are excited to have the show up until April 16th. If anyone out there in Zoom land wants a Zoom tour of the gallery, just let me know. I'm happy to walk around with my phone and show you all the different sculptures that are in the gallery. Thank you, Cristina.
So much, Jennifer. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.